Hey everyone, James Haran here from Paper Dice Games, and today I'm going to be talking about solo RPGs. Specifically, I want to discuss, are you your own GM or Dungeon Master? A few weeks ago, I got an incredible comment on YouTube from Neon Glitch. Here it is. There's a lot of text here, so I will jump to the TLDR. My biggest mistake was thinking the game is GM-less instead of realizing I am both the GM and player. Realizing that totally changed and made this hobby fun for me. So I wanted to take a look at running your own solo RPG through this lens in this video. Are you your own GM, or do you like playing in a way where you do not have a GM? Now, I've done both, and I think there's advantages and disadvantages to both, so I wanted to discuss this a little bit. I'm going to start first with being your own GM. I agree with what Neon Glitch has to say here. I think being your own GM as a solo gamer is a really good way to onboard solo RPGs for somebody who has not done it before. Most people, I would assume, who are going into solo RPGs and looking to see if they can play, have at least experienced in one form or another what a traditional RPG looks like. They may have seen Critical Role on YouTube, may have had a group of friends playing together, they may have seen it in Stranger Things. Either way, I would think that a lot of people looking to play a solo RPG understand what a traditional people at a table RPG looks like, and that includes a game master. So for somebody who's coming into playing a solo RPG for the very first time, they probably have a model of what a game master or dungeon master is in their head, and they can use that to help them play a solo RPG better. So through this lens, you can approach playing a solo RPG by being your own dungeon master, thinking that you're sitting down with your player at the table and resolving conflict using the mechanics of the game, but also generating the outer world and the story arcs as a GM in the game as well. Now, I think there's two main ways to do this. The first is more storytelling, where you are really generating the story yourself and you have a lot of freedom and flexibility with how you want to do things. You're just kind of sending it off the dome, having fun with the story and not worrying too much about anything else. In this version, you may be making decisions rather than using supplements to resolve actions and generate ideas. The other way you can do it is to use supplements or resources to generate ideas and resolve actions. One of the main ways to do this is to use an oracle, like Mythic GM. I've made a video previously about how I think sometimes solo gamers are a little over-reliant on using an oracle, but this is a good way to be your own GM and generate some story arcs and resolve actions using an oracle or random tables provided in the game system, things like that. So in my mind, being your own GM is a very good way to approach solo RPGs. I think that the advantages of doing it this way are that it's easy to start playing a solo game because you probably have a model of what a dungeon master or a game master is doing in an RPG anyways, and you can rely on that model to kind of play both roles as you go through your own solo RPG. The other good thing about doing this method is that there are a ton of resources available. If you go to something like DriveThru or Itch or Google and just type in solo role-playing game, you're going to get a bunch of resources that show you how to use this method and how to be your own dungeon master while you play a solo RPG. Now, there are some disadvantages to using this method, and the main one is you're playing both the GM and the player, and the problem with that is that you have a peek behind the curtain. You see what's going on with the mechanics and the storyline and the possibilities of your resources, and so true surprises are very hard to come by in using this method of being both the GM and the player for your solo RPG. So that leads us to the second method, which is not being your own dungeon master. In this method, you aren't your dungeon master. You are just the player, and you are playing the game and experience the game through only the lens of the player, and yet it's still a solo RPG. Now, how do you do this? That seems challenging, and it can be. There are two main ways to do this in my view. First, you can play a game more like a simulation and less like a role-playing game. So this is something I lean not completely, but a little bit more into with Pendragon, where I don't come up with ideas as much in the game master's role when I'm playing. Instead, I use the mechanics of the game to generate plot hooks and make decisions, and then the other game resources to resolve setting and plot issues going forward. And if you have a game that has a well-rounded and robust mechanical system, You can really set a game up where you don't have to make a lot of dungeon master or game master decisions in the game by relying specifically on the mechanics. The second way you can play a game by not being your own dungeon master is to play a game book or a role-playing game that is specifically designed for solo play. Now, I have a huge list of these that I really want to play someday. There's a lot of really cool looking ones for Call of Cthulhu, but at the moment I am currently playing Ghost of Lion Castle. This is an old school Dungeons & Dragons module, and I am playing this game solo using this method. The game is set up to be played as a player, and there is no dungeon master needed. It relies on the choose your own adventure style mechanic where you decide what direction to go, and then it tells you an entry to flip to in the game book, and then you resolve whatever it says, and you go through the adventure that way. But using this method, using adventures or resources or modules designed specifically for solo play, where a game master is not needed, you can still get the surprises and get the oh my goodness moments that you're looking for as a player, and while not having to be your own dungeon master. So there are some advantages to using this method. Some of the advantages include the fact that you can be surprised while you are playing. You don't have that peek behind the curtain. You don't know the universe of options that could occur, and you can have a lot of fun playing this way as well. The disadvantage to not being your own dungeon master is that oftentimes it takes a lot more work. For example, for Pendragon, I've spent a lot of time trying to build out mechanical resolutions to different situations where I don't have to make decisions. I can just kind of roll the dice to see what happens. But also, these types of games usually spend a little or cost a little bit more money. Game books built specifically for solo play are far, far fewer than traditional RPG game books that do rely on a dungeon master or a game master. And so I don't know if they're more expensive on average, but there are fewer than them. And if you're looking to play a game in that way, you're likely to you're going to have to pay some money essentially. The last disadvantage of not being your own dungeon master is that oftentimes it feels like a board game, more like a board game and less like a role-playing game. When you think about playing a board game, board games have rules and actions laid out that you can do, and you have to make your decisions within those rules and actions that are laid out. A role-playing game, of course, is supposed to be theater of the mind. It's supposed to be whatever comes to mind. The rules should be able to support what you want to do as a character, but oftentimes solo game books restrict you in a way like board games do and make it either difficult or impossible to play the game like a real role-playing game. So that's it. I've enjoyed playing both versions of solo RPGs. I like being my own dungeon master and utilizing my own ideas or other resources to keep the game going, resolve conflicts, and build a story that's really, really fun. But I also like doing it the other way. I also like playing the game not as a dungeon master and just as a player. And to do that, I use mechanics to try and build more of a simulation and less of a free-flowing story game. Or I purchase game books that are built specifically for solo play that do not require the use of a dungeon master or a game master. I would love to hear your thoughts on and experiences on this topic. Which way do you like to play? Do you like to be your own dungeon master? Do you like to not be your own dungeon master? Have you done both? Have you only done one or the other? What are your thoughts? Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next video.